Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, March 24th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 23 days, the Notre Dame game in 163 days, the game against Michigan in 247 days. This has been quite a week for women's sports at Ohio State. Of course, the hockey team just won its first ever national championship on Sunday. Softball team just entered the top 25. Women's tennis team is in the top 5. Pistol team, which is co-ed, just won a national title last weekend. Not bad. And you can add to that the women's basketball team, which just went on the road and absolutely crushed LSU to reach the Sweet 16 of the NCAA Tournament. So we've spent a bunch of time talking about the men's team this month, so today we're going to discuss Kevin McGuff's program. My guest is Wyatt Crosher. He's the publisher of the Hoopla newsletter, which mainly covers women's basketball and especially focusing on the Big Ten, but also branching out into pop culture and other important areas such as the recent Jackass movie. Wyatt, thanks for being here.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So I guess before we get into the Buckeyes and their run, can you just let people know a little bit about Hoopla, how you decided to start doing that, and then how people can sign up?
Sure. So for the past few years before this summer, I was on the Ohio State beat. I was covering the football team and also the women's basketball team for Buckeye Sports Bulletin. And along with all the football stuff, obviously everyone has a lot of coverage of that. But for women's basketball, I was one of the few people that was consistently on that beat. And before I joined that, I had very minimal experience with women's basketball. I was aware of like the Kelsey Mitchell years for Ohio State and everything involving that. But when I joined that beat, I kind of realized how much interesting stuff is going on in this conference recently. Like along with Ohio State, just a lot of teams are kind of getting on the rise. Michigan was like in a program that it never really had before. So as I was starting to leave Buckeye Sports Bulletin, I moved down to Charlotte. I still wanted to kind of stay attached to that, and I thought there was going to be really interesting things going on in the conference. So I wanted to do a newsletter with that. So I did Hoopla, which in theory was twice a week. I talk. Once a week is on women's basketball in the Big Ten, and then the other one is on whatever else. Like you said, I talk about the Jackass movie. It gave me a place so I can just kind of vent out whatever I was trying to write, since I'm not a sports writer anymore technically. And then again, I just really wanted to keep talking about the Big Ten. So that is on Substack. It's for free. You can sign up on emails, subscriptions for free on any of the recent posts. You can find that on my Twitter at WCrosher, or you can just see me tweet them out every Monday and Thursday. But that is where you can find me. It is free to join, and it's a lot of Big Ten and a lot of other crap.
Yeah, and I am a subscriber. It is a great resource. Again, it is free. I would encourage you to pause this and go sign up right now. I will throw a link to your latest newsletter in the post for this podcast on the front page, and then you can sign up through that. There are some interesting parallels this year between the Ohio State men's and women's basketball programs at Ohio State. Both of the coaches have kind of been there a while now. This is Kevin McGuff's 9th season, which I looked at, and I'm like, that can't be right. And it literally counted down the list. This is his 9th season. All right. Neither of the programs had made the Sweet 16 for quite a while. The last time the women's team was there was March of 2017. McGuff has never made the Elite Eight at Ohio State. And then before this season, Dorka Juhas, who was their leading rebounder and second leading scorer, she grad transferred to UConn. And it just, at the start of the year, it was just kind of like, this doesn't feel like this program's headed in the right direction. And then they come out and they go 25-6 and 14-4 in the Big Ten, and here they are in the Sweet 16. So what changed between last summer and now, or maybe what came together over the course of the season for this team?
Yeah, so coming into the year, I had a lot of the similar thoughts as you. Dorka left, obviously, that was a huge one. Then also Aaliyah Patty, who was a starting power forward. I think she started every game she played last year. She went to Texas A&M. And then they also lose a point guard, Madison Green, to injury this year. They gained Taylor Mixell from Oregon, so it's like, okay, they can counteract some of that. But losing both of your forwards and not really returning a forward of any size or anything, like, I thought this was going to be I thought it could be a solid year for Ohio State, but I didn't expect what they ended up doing. I didn't think they had a shot at all to win the Big Ten in the regular season. I didn't think that they would be able to make a run like they have in the NCAA tournament. And I think what they've done is they've really gone deeper into this identity of a 3-point centric team, really guard heavy, really spread out the other team. And the offense has been very, very good all year. Taylor Mixell has been an incredible addition. JC Sheldon has stepped up without Dorka being there. She's really become the star of this team. But what's really impressed me down the stretch, and this wasn't at the beginning of the year, their defense, even with so many guards, has been really, really impressive. And I know we'll talk about the LSU game, but the way they use this press defense, the way they force turnovers, and somehow aren't completely mismatched inside despite not having a really strong forward presence has been really impressive. It's been it's been quite a year for coaching for Kevin McGuff, which is like at the beginning of the year, I wasn't sure what his future was looking like because of this roster and some of the lesser expectations. But this has been quite a coaching job from him. This didn't seem like as talented of a team as they had had in the past, and yet here they are in the Sweet 16.
You mentioned their 3-guard lineup. One fun fact that if you have really not paid attention at all to this team, they have a player named Braxton Miller, and she's from Dayton. It's like, I think I've seen this before, but I don't remember it in basketball. You mentioned the win over LSU. That was a really big deal. I don't know if people know that much about their coach, LSU's coach, Kim Mulkey. She just won a national title at Baylor like 3 years ago. So she's, not quite royalty in the sport, but she's up there. And then Ohio State goes down to LSU and just stomps them. It was like there's a 24-point lead at one point. Like, what is going on? That didn't seem like something that, from reading you, it didn't seem like that was something you were expecting, and doesn't seem like something pretty much anyone else was expecting. So, how did that happen? How did that come together for them?
Yeah, I think I picked Ohio State to be sixth in the preseason in the Big Ten. I just thought that it wasn't that they were going to be bad. Again, I thought they were going to be an NCAA tournament team, but I just didn't think they had enough to counteract what they had lost, especially when Madison Green went down. But really just players stepping up, obviously, like JC Sheldon had been good for this team, but now she's like a 20-point per game scorer. She's an incredible defender on the ball. Probably one of the best transition players I've seen in men or women's basketball. She is so good at just getting a layup every single time. And then Taylor Mikesell, her addition, she was okay at Oregon, and before that she was at Maryland, where she was quite good. And she has just gone absolutely ballistic this year. I think she's hitting like 47% of her threes, just an unheard of number. So those two have been the stars, certainly. But I think what has led to even the second half season surge where they can win the Big Ten, they're in the Sweet 16 now, has been some players that I didn't expect to be as big of contributors as they are. Ricky Harris and Taylor Theory, who's a freshman. These are their stats aren't incredible, but they are such good defensive players that, like I said earlier, their defense has gotten so much better, even with all these guards, because they all can cover multiple positions. They force turnovers, and I think the addition of those players to help on both sides of the ball, plus the scoring of Sheldon and Mikesell, has just kind of led to this really impressive combination that led to a big upset over LSU, which, like you said, Kim Mulkey has won national titles. This is her first year at LSU, but they were a terrible program. I think they won like 26 games this year. So she's that type of coach, and it didn't matter because Ohio State just thumped them for most of that game.
Anyone who has followed you on Twitter for any time or read your newsletter for any time knows you are a pretty big booster of Big Ten women's basketball, and you're a big believer in the conference. And the Big Ten on the whole has had a pretty good run this month in the women's tournament. 4 of the Sweet 16 teams, I got Ohio State, Maryland, Indiana, and Michigan all still alive. The only real disappointment was Iowa, which lost in the second round, which, if you're familiar with the men's tournament, you've seen that movie before. Has the Big Ten gotten stronger as a conference recently? And if so, how did that happen? What allowed the conference to kind of improve its quality?
I would say that it's certainly gotten better. This year and last year, they've had 4 teams in the Sweet 16, and that's the first 2 times they've ever done that. They had never had 4 in any year. What has led to that? I don't know exactly the cause, but it is programs that were not historically good, like really finding a good coach and really finding like a veteran group of players that stayed. And they've just really piled on that. Indiana and Michigan are specifically who I'm talking about. Indiana's whole starting 5 has 1,000 points in college career. Like it's just one of the most veteran groups you'll ever see. I think they are all seniors, or maybe one's a junior. Michigan, I think these are their first 2 ever Sweet 16s these past 2 years. Really veteran group there. Naz Hillman's one of the best players in the country. She's from Ohio, so I guess you'd call it a recruiting loss for Ohio State, but helpful for the Big Ten on the whole. And then Maryland is they're the other Sweet 16 team. They have been good every year since they've joined the Big Ten, but it used to be like, okay, well, Maryland will win the conference, then who else will be good? And it's not the case anymore. Maryland didn't win the regular season. They lost their first game in the Big Ten tournament. So they're still an incredibly talented team, but other teams have just caught up to them. So I think you just see a lot more parity and a lot more of a balance in the Big Ten compared to just being Maryland and then the rest for this past decade. So it's been really fun to watch. There's been a lot of upsets. There's obviously a lot of teams have made runs. It's just been a really entertaining conference on the women's side.
And parity is kind of a big word for the sport nationally as well. I think, it's gotten a lot more competitively balanced just across the country in recent years. I think people who don't really pay attention to women's basketball just kind of go, oh, that's the one that UConn wins. You know, the UConn beats everyone by 70 points and wins the national championship every year. There have been 5 different champions in the last 5 tournaments. UConn has not won the national championship since 2016. And, you know, the last 3 title games have been decided by a total of 5 points, 1 point, 1 point, and 3 point going back the last 3 games. I mean, that, like, this is a sport where it's like, there is some drama here. And, you know, that balance, I mean, it feels like that balance is kind of having a positive impact across the sport, just in terms of building interest, you know, not, you know, at a more national level and not just who's going to lose to UConn this year.
Yeah, you mentioned UConn, and they just beat UCF, who is not like a power of any sorts. As they're a 7 seed, they're a good 7 seed, but they beat them by, I think, 3 or 5. Like, it was a game that came down to the final possession. Like, UConn is still a really good team. It's just like in the Big Ten, everyone's caught up with them. South Carolina seemed like they might be the big power no one could beat this year, and then they lose to Kentucky in the championship game. It was like a 7 seed in that conference tournament. The parity has gotten it's way more even than it used to be when it was UConn and Tennessee every year. Stanford won it all last year. They're still a very good program, and there are so many good teams, and the Big Ten is just kind of a small version of that. But I don't know, the talent just has been way more spread out than it used to be, and it makes for a lot of really fun tournament games. The round of 32 especially was very, like, almost all good games, and there's a couple 10 seeds in the Sweet 16. It's good to see. It's good to see for the sport, and it makes for more entertaining basketball.
All right, so the Buckeyes, next up is second-seeded Texas. That is Friday evening at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. And you know, the Ohio State men's team just ran into a second-seeded team, and it didn't go particularly well, but it was, you know, it was close, but that was the end of the season. So what does the matchup with Texas look like for Ohio State this weekend?
On paper, Texas has been a very, very good team as of late. I think they won the Big 12. They've been on quite a roll. I would say that, like, just on paper, again, I would favor Texas. They can kind of counteract the 3-point shooting of Ohio State. Both are really good shooting teams. I think if Ohio State plays the game it did against LSU, then I think they could certainly beat Texas, which is easy to say. But Ohio State, when they played LSU, that looked like a top 5 team in the country. The defense was exceptional. They were hitting their shots. They didn't really let up at any point. I think if you can keep getting those sort of performances, you could certainly beat Texas, and then you'd probably play Stanford next, and that's a whole another. I don't want to even get into the potential beat. Stanford's crazy good, but who knows? I think Texas is a beatable team, but it's also it's a very talented team, and I don't know if I would favor Ohio State, but it's all about just trying to repeat what you did against LSU, because LSU and Texas are pretty comparable.
And, you know, you look at the number of people who are pointing to the Sweet 16 as the barometer of success for the men's program, and whether they got there or not, well, the women have gotten there. So I guess it's been a successful season either way. So, Wyatt, thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it. And make sure you check out the Hoopla newsletter at hooplanewsletter.substack.com. Again, I'll have a link to that in the post for this podcast on the front page of the site. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.